Today we are going to discuss about EDI X12 formats, especially EDI X12 837 loops, because 837, as we know, like this is about claim submission. In this 837, we have institutional claims, which is of 837I. 837P is for physicians and all, and as well as 837D is for the dental claims. Now, in this regard, so whenever we are trying to understand about the healthcare, followed by the kind of formats that are required for us to use, etc., all that, it's always important for us to understand what are the different file formats when it comes to the 837 X12 files are concerned. Normally, these EDI 837 or it can be 835 or anything, but our session is all about 837 X12 files. These are the files which are structured in an hierarchical format, as I told you, right? So using dot, what are the different segments we have, followed by the kind of loops, what you can see. This is all something which we call it as loops, all that. So whatever the kind of loops we have created, what are the kind of segments are we creating over here? You can see different segmentations were made here. So when it comes to the segmentation of these loops, where the segmentations contains all the specific data at the same time whatever the loop groups we have relating to the segments together, all that. In this context, we need to understand what are the key components we have. Generally, we have two key components, especially for 837 X12 files are concerned. One is about ISA segment. This is one component we have. And whereas the second one is called the transactional set, right? So these are the two different things. So when it comes to the ISS segment, which is majorly also known as the interchanging control headers, majorly useful for us to segment segmentation of contains all the information about the sender, receiver, everything will be known under ISA segment. Now, when it comes to the transaction sets, these are the main systems of messaging when you want to send, such as any kind of order details you are sending or something or receiving. So everything that comes under the transaction sets. These are the two major components we see when we are using X12 file formats, especially EDI X12 formats, right? So 837 as an example we have taken. When it comes to the EDI X12, as in when I said, especially 837I, which is an institutional claim, as I said. So there are different informations we need to provide. So the first one about the primary payer subscriber, where we will be mentioning about the payer subscription details followed with his details, residential address, date of birth, right? So mailing address, date of birth, followed by whatever the kind of Medicare insurance ID they have, payer ID, everything will be mentioned under the primary payer subscriber. Next one about the patient. This is about it's almost as same like as a primary subscriber, whatever was mentioned, if the person itself is the patient. Next, destination pair, whichever the plan are we using, either it can be Medicare A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, all that. So you know, right? So in the last sessions, I discussed even about that, right? Medicare C is a Medicare Advantage plan, which is being used. A, B, and as well as D is also for the medicines cost, drugs cost, etc. Right? So destination pair details has to be mentioned. After that, we need to mention about the submitter, right? So who has submitted this means our institutions are submitted, hospitals or someone submitted. So those details we need to be mentioned here, who has submitted, which hospital, etc. Those details we need to be submitted. Next is a receiver. Receiver normally a Medicare, right? So EDI, for example, 00120, right? So all these things are comes under the receiver part. Next is about billing provider. Billing provider itself is a hospital where we need to mention about the NPI number they have, whatever the TIN number they have, or any kind of Medicare provider number do we have, or followed by the address, everything will be mentioned in this. This is something we need to mention under the billing provider. Next is attending physician, whoever is attending the physician, either it can be a doctor or someone. So those details has to be mentioned, followed by this There will be some ID number for the doctors like UPIN number, etc. that need to be mentioned in this. Next, patient account number. You can see the patient account number like date of admission, right? So including all the details like date of admission or statement period date or place of services, followed by whatever the kind of occurrence codes and dates we are using. Either it can be procedure or diagnosis, whatever we have made for a patient while we are providing the treatment, whatever the code numbers are we going to provide, we have used. For example, X-ray scanning, right? So different code numbers we have. Followed by this, subsequently, we need to mention the dates in that. Followed by that, next condition code, value codes. Next, diagnosis codes, as I mentioned you, right? So if there is any kind of secondary diagnosis codes, and how many number of coverage dates we have, right? So everything we need to be mentioned, including the charges for each and every service that we have provided, and what is the individual cost and final cost. Everything will be mentioned under that. Finally, secondary payer subscriber, where we need to mention about any secondary payer subscriber we have, right? So let's say, for example, wife is a secondary payer subscriber for the per individual and all. So we need to mention the subscriber address uh, followed by the gender, right? So gender, male or female, right? So if it is a male wife, if it is a wife, either primary, secondary may be the husband, like something like that, so right? So married, gender details, gender information we need to mention, followed by the date of birth we need to mention for that. At the same time, whatever the state IDs we have or payer IDs we have, right? Something like 1135 or something like that sort. So different ID numbers are 1123, right? Something like that. So example I'm just giving you. So pair ID numbers will be mentioned in that. This is how generally EDI 837 X12 file formats, especially in context to the institutional claims when we are developing any healthcare, when you're trying to understand about healthcare and all. This is what and how generally we need to learn. This is what and how this changes, that if there is any kind of changes happens and all, how to identify errors and how to rectify the errors, that we will continue in the next session. I'll discuss in the next session. I hope you guys have understood.